My guest today is an innovator and specialist in swing. He cultivated his drum sound and tone with early incarnations of West Coast country rock, including Nashville West, the Byrds, later on with the Flying Burrito Brothers. He created all his own parts for seminal albums when there was a commerce-based record industry. My guest is also a great songwriter and string player, inventing the B-bender or string bender guitar. He has been a leader in his own right and had a cosmic relationship with the late, great Clarence White. Gene Parsons, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Thank you so much, Jake. I'm very humbled by that little announcement you just made there. Thank you very much.
It's an honor, man. I kind of wanted you to talk about, I kind of feel like the music that you grew up listening to as a boy into teenagehood didn't have drums in it. Were you playing drums to a lot of the music you came up on, country rock, or not rock, just folk or trio work? Can you talk a little bit about...
No, I came into the drums. Drums was certainly not my instrument of choice to begin with, or any of my first instruments. I started out on strings with, really wanted to play the fiddle, but I had broken my hand so bad that I couldn't play fiddle. But I began playing ukulele, then guitar, then banjo. And the banjo, it's a long story, Jake. Do we have time?
I just wanted for you to talk about, I mean, maybe it wasn't your first, the instrument you were at best. To me, rhythm is healing. And I just wanted you to talk about how you learned to dance in your own body.
You mean playing the drums?
Exactly. How'd you learn to let the body dance? It's how we walk. Ultimately,
well,
so many
of the... I'm no dancer. That for sure. If you get me on the dance floor, it's not a pretty picture.
No. I mean. No,
I understand what you're saying there, Jake. I don't know how to say it, but I mean, I just listened. I got very interested in the drums after learning how to play the bass and playing with drummers, with good drummers, and them, telling me some things about rhythm, since the bass and the drums are the rhythm section for the most part. And I learned a lot from other drummers, and there were some very wonderful musicians that took me under their wing, and I got thrown into playing drums, literally. I arrived with my bass, and my dear friend Gib Gilbo, who had hired me for playing in the club called the Jack of Diamonds in Palmdale, California.
Wow.
I moved there to take this 7-night a week gig. 7 nights a week we would play, and I showed up with my bass, and Gib said, "Oh, I forgot to tell you. Glad you moved and everything. Glad you sold your house. Glad you quit your job, but you're not our bass player." I said, "No." He said, "No, you're our drummer." And I said, "Oh, is that right?" I said, "Well, you little bugger."
Wow.
Yeah, I don't even have a set of drums. He says, "Well, we bought you a set. It's inside. I hope you like the color blue." Said that, these folks don't care. They're drinking a lot. And, you've got plenty of space to learn how to play the drums, and you get to do it every night, 7 nights a week. So that's how I started playing the drums.
Your buddy Gib, how do you spell his first name?
Gib is spelled G-I-B. He was a Cajun. Gilbo, G-U-I-L-B-E-A-U, and sometimes they put an X on the end of it.
You would consider him, I mean, you guys were like, was he somebody, was a mentor to you or a peer for you?
Definitely both of these,
yes.
But mostly a mentor. A little older than me. He's the one that got me into the music business in the first place.
I want to go back to something. When you were playing bass, when I interviewed George Porter from the Meters, he talked about the bass drum not being very prevalent in early records, especially like jazz records and things like that. I mean, can you talk about what you were specifically focused on when you were listening to the drummer in terms of how to lock the groove?
Well, I used to listen to...
Were you listening to Motown a lot? Yeah, go ahead.
Man Jack, late at night, when he played all those good jazz and blues records. And I love the bass in that, and I love the drums and a lot of that stuff, that early stuff. And I certainly started listening, paying attention to the bass drum, because the bass and the bass drum had to be synchronized. And I've worked with a drummer who was saying, "You're not watching my foot, buddy." He said, "You need to watch my foot if you're going to play bass, because you and we're the same instrument. That bass and this bass drum is the same thing."
Mm-hmm.
And so he said, "You got to start watching my foot," and he started teaching me how to do that. The bass drum in the old records, a lot of times the bass drum was tuned differently than they tune them now. It was more of a boom boom, and they really didn't. If you notice, the bass is not very prevalent in a lot of early records. It's because the recording industry, the recording technology had not really advanced to the point where they could really reproduce the low tones as well as they can, of course, now. And of course, it got so much better in the 50s and 60s.
Right, totally. No, I'm curious about, like, when you showed up at that gig in Palmdale, and Gibbs said you're playing drums. Clearly, you couldn't really be part of the conversation at first. What were you focused on most in terms of, like, what were you listening for the most? I mean, had you played drums before, or that was your...
No, I had not.
And was this a whole new song bag, or you guys had actually shedded on these tunes that you were about to play?
Well, I mean, the songs that we were playing were country rock, so it was straight ahead eights, or it was a shuffle, or
Sure.
It was a waltz, or it was, 6/8 or triplets, and I knew what the drums were supposed to sound like, and so I just started playing really simply, and just started trying to keep, from rushing or slowing down and dragging, and in the beginning, in country, there wasn't a lot to the drums.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, we had guest stars that came to the Jack of Diamonds. One was little Jimmy Dickens, and he would get up there with his guitar. He was so great. He would sit in with come and play and have the house band back him up, and he did that all over the United States. And he never knew what the band was going to be, but his big concern was the drummer. And he would look back at the drummer, he'd look back at me, here I am, he says, "Drummer, no fancy stuff, no pills, just play straight ahead."
I love it. Yeah.
They do not rush. And for goodness sake, don't drag. And so we just played straight. But I got exposed to some really wonderful stuff, listening to other musicians play. I started trying to... I'm not a schooled drummer. I play like a Neanderthal.
You're a street. You're what we call a street scholar. Okay, you're not.
Oh, I'm terrible. I mean, I'm just, and I suffer physically from it these days. I don't play drums anymore at all. I want to head. Were you
part of a jug band at all? You play wash tub ever?
Not at all.
Because you never played tub. When I was hanging with Rowan, he put this CD on of Nashville West, and I had not been hip to it before that. And I wanted you to talk a little bit about how you met Clarence, and how the band developed trust to be able to create something seminal like that.
Well, we met Gib and I, and Wayne Moore was our bass player. And Gib and Wayne and a guy named Daryl Cotton had been in a group, the first group that I ever joined, which was called the Castaways. They had been the Four Young Men, and they became the Castaways. Daryl had a studio at Crossroads of the World in Hollywood, and he had us come in for a session, and I was playing drums, and Clarence White, he said, "We got a great guitar player that's going to be on this session." He said, "His name's Clarence White," and I went, "Oh, Clarence White," because I knew who he was, because I was a fan of his when he played with the Kentucky Colonels.
Absolutely.
And I was really not into rock and roll and not even into country that much, although I liked country. I was into folk and bluegrass to begin with.
That is I'm so glad you just revealed that, dude. I thought you were gonna say you were a jazz snob, but you made that clear.
Not at all.
Yeah,
no,
I did.
I did. Into jazz.
I did.
My mom loved jazz. She liked the old jazz,
The stride pianos, though, or like
all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, the boogie woogie. Yeah.
So anyway, so we played, and there Clarence was just knocked us out, and we did a couple sessions there, and Clarence was just learning how to play the electric guitar. In fact, he was still using a capo on a Telecaster, which he threw away about a week later. But he was just learning how to play the electric guitar, and we were just playing all this amazing rhythm. And he's the one that really, I think he's probably one of the leading people for me that got me into playing all kinds of rhythms. And other musicians. At one point, I used to rush a little bit, and some very capable veteran musicians cured me of that. They gave me some things to work on, so I didn't rush, so that I'd lock into the groove. And I really just mostly concentrated on the groove more than anything else.
I would go over some of the audience's head. You talked about Clarence. His rhythm chops were strong, and they inspired you to actually find new rhythms as well.
Oh yes.
Explain how it translates over in your ear from the guitar to the drums. That's really, I mean, in some ways, Jerry Garcia was like that too.
Hard to describe it. I mean, he just played a lot of rhythms that I wanted to play as well on the drums to enhance what he was doing or to augment what he was doing. And so slowly, we played. I didn't get to the part where after that session, he was looking for an electric gig because he just got the electric guitar. We said, well, buddy, you better come with us. So he came out and played with us out in Palmdale for a while. And that's where we met Sneaky Pete, too. Sneaky Pete would come and play with us.
That's awesome, dude.
And then we went to work at a place called the Nashville West in El Monte, and we became the band called the Nashville West. We were the house band there. Again, 7 nights a week. And on Sunday, we'd come and play after lunch until dinner time, take an hour off for dinner, and then play until 2 in the morning. And then in those days in Los Angeles, and around that area, on Sunday, we'd go to the Aces Club. After everybody played at 2 in the morning, we'd go to the Aces Club, and the Aces would stay up open all night and quit serving liquor, and they served breakfast, coffee, and all the musicians would come there, and we have a big jam session every Sunday. There was a lot of places to play.
My God. Wait. The Aces, that was in El Monte, too?
That was near El Monte. Yeah, I think it was actually in El Monte.
When we're talking like, I mean, Jesse Ed Davis, Johnny Guitar Watson. Who? I mean, I'm not even. I don't even know what I'm like. Who would show up and jam?
Carl Walden. We'd have Chris Hillman would show up and play. A lot of people.
I dig. I mean, how much of it was like, looking back on it, today's musician, the only way you make any money is if you're a creative musician, is by road dogging it and making money at the merch table. And they have to wear about 8 hats on top of that. They have to be their booking agent, manager, and they have to do everything.
It's so difficult for musicians now.
When you think back to Nashville West, the fact that you were playing all the time, granted, your chops were in great shape. You had live chops. But as far as like, do you remember the feeling, or did you appreciate the fact that you guys were really able to focus on the art itself, like the songs and the music, and not have to worry? I mean, granted, you didn't have like, I guess maybe this would be more appropriate with the Byrds when you had a record company and that kind of stuff. But I just wonder how immersed you were in the art because the cost of living wasn't so crushing and you weren't so stressed out about having to do 8 things at one time.
Well, it was nice to be able to focus on the art, that's for certain.
What did that look like? What did that look like?
How good we had it, actually. Now it's so difficult to find try and find a club gig that you're playing 7 nights a week.
Exactly.
Unless you go to Las Vegas or Reno. I don't even know if they still do it in Reno, but it's going to be tough.
Looking back on it, what was the artistic thing for you? I mean, you weren't somebody who was going home and trying to be like Tony Williams, working on your chops or facility or technique. But like for you, can you just talk about like how the germ of a song emanates for Gene Parsons?
The germ of a song emanates usually. I'm no songwriter. I mean, I've written a few songs that are good ones. Very few. I'm not a prolific songwriter.
Hey man, quality over quantity, bro.
Well, I appreciate that. When you got someone like Bob Dylan, he's got quality.
Yeah, I mean, come on, dude. You're gonna lose already, man. Forget comparing that.
But the way a song would usually develop for me would be from the guitar, or from a banjo, or then sometimes a pedal steel guitar, or even a mandolin. I'll be sitting down with an instrument and just not paying attention, kind of just playing, and sometimes the instrument will speak to you and say, "Oh, what if you did this? What if you did that?" And then you got a little groove going, little chord progression, or maybe a little hook or a lick. And the song, for me anyway, comes from that. Doesn't usually start with lyrics. The song for me usually, the melody and the chord progression and the feel of the song then dictates the lyrics. Very rarely have I started with just lyrics and then going with a song. So it usually comes from an instrument.
Which song on that Nashville West album is like what you just described?
Well, I don't think I wrote anything on Nashville.
Really?
West,
Interesting.
Except Nashville West.
Of course, you wrote the title track,
Nashville
man.
West. So, Clarence and I worked that one up. Just messing around with two guitars. The tune Nashville West, but I think they're all mostly cover tunes. Back in those days, we did mostly cover tunes. We did some of Gibbs' tunes. Gibbs wrote a lot of Cajun tunes like "Take a City Bride" and "Sweet Susanna from Louisiana."
Wow.
And we do other Cajun tunes like "Diggy Liggy Lie," "Diggy Liggy Low," these kind of tunes. But it was mostly country covers.
Did the Nashville West develop a national reputation?
National?
Well, I mean, people. It became a hip spot for cats that were in town. Did it draw in like a larger crowd?
The Nashville West and us playing at the Nashville West at the club definitely did draw some people in, especially because of Clarence. Everybody wanted to hear that amazing guitar player, Clarence. And they would come from far and wide, mostly musicians, wanting to see how in the heck does he do that, and oh my gosh, that's an interesting way to play the guitar. I never thought of that before. So we did get people that were regulars that liked to dance and whatnot, but we had a lot of musicians who would come and listen.
How did you, can you talk a little bit about how you and Clarence actually wound up joining? Was Hillman one of those cats? I mean, did you wind up getting tight with those guys? That's how you joined the Byrds?
Well, Clarence and Chris were buddies to begin with. Because Chris came from the bluegrass background,
right?
And Clarence and he were acquaintances, and they had played together before. And after, at one point, they were looking. It was right during the period when they were doing "Sweetheart of the Rodeo." Although Clarence had played on some Byrds albums prior to "Sweetheart of the Rodeo, just as a session musician.
Really?
Oh yeah, several of the Byrds albums, and "Younger Than Yesterday" and a bunch of those other albums he played on.
Interesting.
As a session musician, but at one point, Chris wanted to bring Clarence into their group, especially because now he had a string bender, and they were doing all kinds of stuff that had pedal steel on it. Lloyd Green and J.D. Manos had put pedal steel on Sweetheart of the Rodeo, and they wanted that sound, and Clarence was doing it, not only by hand, but also with a string bender. And so he went with the Byrds, and Hillman's cousin was playing drums, and they fired him. I thought he was great. I thought he did a good job. I thought he was really good, actually. And
maybe you didn't bring a good vibe, man. You bring a great vibe.
They were looking for a drummer, and of course Clarence said, "Well, I got the drummer for you."
Wow.
And so, and they had heard me play because they came down to not the Jack of Diamonds, but the Nashville West. And so I went and auditioned, and they said, "Okay, well, you're hired." Wasn't too long after that, though, Chris quit and went with Graham to do the Burritos. Hang on a second here, Jake.
Sure.
The old man's got to get a drink of water here.
Of course, man. When you, like, the Byrds already had numerous radio-friendly hits, but I'm curious about, like, how much your live shows mirrored the records themselves, or was Clarence just having so many ideas that there were certain tunes that lent themselves to stretching out?
We played every night. We played every tune differently.
Yes. Yeah, okay.
It was always a new experience every night.
You never play the same song the same way once.
Well, I mean, we had some basic format that we would fall back on, structure, but we changed it every night. We evolved every night. The live band, we were evolving when we were really, involved in it. Every night was an adventure. I
mean, can you talk a little bit about a couple of songs that were, maybe on the record cut down to 4 minutes or 5 minutes, but in a live setting it would go maybe 15 minutes?
Oh gosh, I don't know. 8 Miles High was always an adventure every night. Play that bloody thing every night, and it turned into about a 15, 16, 17-minute long exercise.
Tell me there was a bass and drum solo.
Oh, yes, there was.
Can you point me to some, is there anything captured on record or live?
Well,
I want to hear Gene Parsons playing like Elvis.
Yeah. There is on the double album, the Untitled album.
Yes.
There's live at I think it's I can't remember where it was, some big venue in New York. But what you can do, and it's difficult for me to look at it because there's a YouTube video of the Byrds doing 8 Miles High at the Fillmore East, and you can go and hit YouTube Byrds 8 Miles High Fillmore, and you get to see some of the stuff we did.
Were you were you hip to did you have any Dixieland influences, or like what was some of the jazz that you dug on? Was it like Miles or Brubeck, or like, I mean, what? I know you weren't
mostly jazz, blues kind of stuff. Although I like people like Dr. John and those kind of people when they became popular. And Taj Mahal, not really blues, but
no, man. Billy Cobham told me that Taj was the only artist who could either open or close for the Mahavishnu Orchestra. Most cats did not want to close for them,
No, we played with the Mahavishnu a bunch.
You did?
All over the East Coast.
Oh, that is so freaking...
He's one of my favorite drummers.
Dude, can you talk about... Were you on the side of the stage during his set?
I would definitely watch Billy. He's a left-handed guy playing a right-handed set of drums, and he's playing like 5 guys on the drums. Sound like a train out of control going down a hill. I mean, the guy is phenomenal. Such a wonderful person. A very, very decent, wonderful human being.
He's a dear elder and mentor and friend to me. I love him so much. I'm so glad. I knew that they went on tour with the studio band, The Section from L.A., Lee Sklar, Danny Korchmar, Russ Kunkel. I did not know that the Byrds. You guys would open for them, or would just flip flop, or how would that?
They would open for us, if you can believe that.
Dude, this is the group.
We were the headliner, and it was a hard freaking act to follow.
Brother Parsons, dude, let's talk about that. Because I really need you to talk. Younger cats, I'm 44. Younger cats, not as mentally strong as your generation for a variety of reasons. Can you talk about Merle Brigante? I don't know if you ever crossed paths with him. He played with Loggins and Musina. They played Boston Common, and they opened to a packed 40,000 people Boston, and he walked away, cleaned up. He's feeling all good about himself. He goes out to the soundboard, and these guys looked like disheveled rags, like white robes and college T-shirts and stuff come out. He's like, "What is this?" And he almost quit music after he saw Billy. And Milt Holland gave him a pep talk. And I'm just wondering, how did you?
Oh no, you watch Billy, and it's for me. It was like, now there's a real drummer. Right. By God, look at that. I'll never be able to play like that. But boy, is he something I want to just enjoy watching him and hearing him play.
Is it fair to say there's some times where I yell up my friends on the bandstand and say play in the spirit of Coltrane. They don't play like Coltrane, but play in his spirit. Do you try to channel that spirit of Billy in your own playing in some degree?
Oh gosh, I don't think I have the chops to even think about channeling any of what Billy does. There's I tried to, when I used to play drums, what I really focused on was getting a really snappy groove. I like to play a really good, tight Texas shuffle.
I love it.
I like it to snap. I want it to pop. I want it to pick the song up, to elevate it.
Oh, dude, you're nailing it. Dude, I love this, dude.
I don't have the chops to do all the fancy stuff that people like. I never had the chops and that Billy Cobham has. People like Billy Cobham certainly going to have an influence on you if you're playing the same instrument. You get that feel and that sound in your bones when you're listening to it, and certainly some of it, if as much as is possible, is going to come through. But no, he's definitely a wonder.
How this is what, and it doesn't matter because what Milt Holland told Brigante is Billy, you'll never be Billy Cobham, and Billy Cobham will never be you. You're your own cat, and Billy is such an amazingly open, accessible person in this era of prima donnas and so many other people that have just checked out. Before I forget, I have to ask you about this, just because. So, hear me out on this. You were hip to the Sons of Champlin. Do you remember that band?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so Terry Haggerty, did you ever cross paths with him? He was a guitar player in that band.
Okay, no, I never did. I did work with their drummer, who passed away a couple of years ago.
Jim Preston?
Yes.
You worked with Preston?
Yeah, we were in the same band. He lived in Mendocino for quite a while. We were in a band called Wood and Steel. Wood and Steel. I played steel guitar. He played drums, of course. And,
just a duo?
David Hayes played bass.
Holy cow!
And we had a local fella named Stephen Bates playing guitar. I played pedal steel, and we played for a couple of years, actually, just local. And James became a friend. Fact is, I just saw James' wife yesterday. We just did a benefit for the Ukrainian refugees at the Rotary Park in Mendocino. A big crowd came out.
That's so beautiful.
James' wife came and just talked with her yesterday.
Well, he was a ridiculous drummer. But anyway, So Terry's father, Frank, was in the Bay Area one of the preeminent guitar players. He would come down. He was part of that Wrecking Crew scene. He'd come down, and there was another cat named Larry Murphy in Antioch, and Larry Murphy was a bit of an avatar. And the reason I'm going there is because I just interviewed a cat named Greg Douglas who played with Cipollina, and he wrote Jungle Love, the Steve Miller tune. Anyway, he said that Larry Murphy Sr. created the string bender.
Well, he'd be wrong.
Okay, well, I'm just saying that this is not some off-the-wall Looney Tune. He said in a recent interview to me, he actually went out of the way. He said Larry Murphy Sr. did it before Clarence White. But I just want you to talk about how that came into...
In 1966, Clarence was one of the first guys to do a little lick on the Telecaster where he would chime the D string and pull it over the nut to bring it up. He uses, on the Nashville West album, he did that a bit. He was playing Ode to Billy Joe, and you could hear him. He would do that. He also did it on the high E, too. That he'd have tuned down to D, and he'd chime it and pull it up. Anyway, we were doing a session with the Gazin brothers, and we had the basic track down. And Clarence was going to overdub a lead guitar on there, and he mentioned to me, he said, "Boy, I wish I had a third hand." And I said, "Yeah, what do you mean?" He says, "Well, I want to be able to pull that B string up and chime it, not only open, but on the second and third position." And I said, "Well, I'll be your third hand. I can do that. I know what you want to do. I know what that sounds like." So we messed around. We were kind of laughing and joking about it, but we heard that sound. You know, he'd chime the string, holding the position, and I'd pull the B string with my finger, and he said, "Wow." He said, "You're a mechanic. You're a machinist. Figure out a way to do that." And I said, "Well, yeah, no big deal. We just get some steel guitar pullers and some cables and put some pedals on the floor." And he said, No. He says, "I don't want a pedal steel. I want a guitar. I want it to go in the case. I don't want to have to hook anything up to it. I want to be able to keep my hands in their normal stance and be able to pull that B string up. Figure it out." So there was a guy in San Diego. You've seen people do a swell with their volume knob with their little finger.
Sure.
Well, this guy hooked up a rheostat to his shoulder strap, and he would do the swell with his shoulder strap. He had a spring-loaded rheostat hooked up to the shoulder strap with a lever, and I went, aha, that's how we're going to do it. So Sneaky Pete gave me a bunch of steel guitar pieces from an 800, Fender 800 pedal steel, and I drew out some plans and made some parts and modified the steel guitar stuff and showed the design to Clarence, and he said, "Wow, okay." He says, "How long do you think it's going to take to put that on there?" I said, "I don't know. I've never done it before." And I said, he said, "I better get another guitar to use while you're working on it." I said, "Yeah, you better." So he got a white Telecaster, which ended up going to Bob Warburton, who put a string bender on it himself with a little bit of help from me.
Bob Warburton?
Yeah, Bob Warford.
Bob
Anyway,
Warford, yeah.
So Clarence hands me his Sunburst beautiful Telecaster, and the first thing I had to do was cut an 1.25 inch square out behind, through the body, behind the bridge to put in my mechanism. And so the next morning I had this little square with a Sunburst finish on it, and we usually had coffee together. We were both living in Palmdale at that point. And I came over for coffee, and he says, "Well, how's it going?" And I sling this thing, slide it across the table, a little square of Sunburst wood. And he looks and he went, "Oh, wow." He said, "We're past the point of no return, aren't we?" I said, "Yep." But a few weeks later, I had the thing going, and it worked. And Clarence started figuring out how to use it, and he really invented the way to use it. And if you listen to Marty Stewart now, who has that original guitar, and we got the first, well, see, Marty plays it like Clarence did. He really is. Marty's such a wonderful guy and such a great musician.
Yeah.
If you want to hear how the string bender should sound, you listen to Marty Stewart. But Eddie Tickner, who was the manager of the Byrds, along with Jim Dixon, was Clarence and my manager. And Eddie said, well, you better patent that. So I don't have the money to patent. He said, well, I'll put the money up. So he put the money up, and we patented it. We got the first patent in 1967. And we had to do a patent search. When you get a patent, you do a patent search, a very extensive search to see if anything like that had been patented. And we came up with some interesting little adaptations that were not like what we were doing with the shoulder strap. But there was nothing like we did with the shoulder strap, so we had a free rein to patent the device. And so I firmly believe we're the first ones to ever do it.
I'm sorry, I missed that. Was there anything even comparable in to what you were doing?
Well, there was one where a guy had a like a steel guitar. He had a roller behind one of the strings and a rope tied to the string.
Whoa.
With a hangman's noose in it that he put his toe in and pulled it while he was holding the steel guitar.
No way.
Yeah, this kind of stuff.
That's out, man.
And so we had a pretty open field.
Were you? I remember I interviewed Crosby. He talked about playing live on the Sunset Strip, and a lot of the beat poets would come in. But were you going, like, would you go and check out guys like Thelonious Monk, or would you go see any cats that you were inspired by after your gigs?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I never went to see Thelonious Monk, although I have become a fan of his and a fan of that era of jazz.
Yeah.
And the wonderful Ken Burns documentary on jazz is something that I've watched several times and loved. Yeah, of course, always try to go and see good musicians. There were a lot of people playing.
Yeah. Well, no, because I mean, like, I'm just wondering if you went to like the black part of town to see guys playing the shuffle. Like, how did you learn to play? That's the question. You talk about it like you're not like, and I don't even get off on technique and facility and chops, but how do you use the cymbals to
You're a drummer nut, I can tell.
You know what it is? I'm actually I've played with a couple of surrogate uncles, and I felt the freedom of 4-way coordination, and I like it. So I know. I'm just wondering, like, what was your way of elevating a song, like to put it on that padding, so that you can like fly away? How would you use the entire kit?
Well, okay, so you talked about a shuffle. I listened to records, listened to people playing. I mean, I sat in front of B.B. King when he had his original all-black band in Chicago, sat right in front of him and watched his little ancient drummer. They were all dressed in suits.
Wow.
And he must have weighed all of 95 pounds. I can't remember his name. I wish I could. And his shuffle just killed me. It killed me. The way he squeezed those dotted 8 notes together and just made it, you've got a shuffle. The shuffle goes da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Well, that's all fine and good, but if you tighten that up and put some beef behind it, so you're going da-da, 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 da-da. Tighten those notes up and you got some swing happening,
No doubt.
Yeah.
You were, like those early Byrd albums, a lot of the Wrecking Crew, like Hal Blaine would play on those records. When you came into the band, the first album with the Byrds, Was it all the cats in the band? Did you have any of the Wrecking Crew involved?
Not at all. It was all just us. Just us. And I have to say, when I came into the Byrds, I was not a fan of the Byrds. Although the tunes did become near and dear to me, some of them, after I joined the Byrds. But in any case, no, we did all our own stuff. I think a couple times we did keyboard players in, and we got Sneaky Pete in to do some stuff. And at one point, but we pretty much recorded everything ourselves.
That's pretty amazing. Yeah.
Mostly Studio B, CBS Studio, Sunset and Vine, which no longer exists.
Who was your go-to engineer?
Back in those days, we had a variety of engineers. Lee Hirschberg was one of my favorite engineers.
What was the name?
Lee Hirschberg.
Yes.
I don't know if he's still alive. But I know he recorded a lot of really wonderful recordings. And one time I asked Lee, I said, Lee, what's your secret? How do you get such great sound? And he says, well, Gene, he says, see this board here? He says, look at all this EQ crap here. It's just, they should put glass over it and have a hammer over there and, use in case of emergency.
Right.
He says, I set everything just straight up and down. I don't use EQ. If the instrument doesn't sound good, I'll move the mic. If it still doesn't sound good, I'll change the mic. If it still doesn't sound good, we change the instrument. If it still doesn't sound good, we change the musician. It's got to sound good.
He has it down. He has it the entire manifesto right there. How did he mic your drums?
Oh gosh, we're talking about half a century.
No, what I'm saying is though, the reason I asked that is in today's world, every part of the drum is mic'd, so there's no leakage, there's no space. But back in the day, Glyn Johns, a lot of these engineers, one mic by the bass drum and one left and right overhead. I'm just curious if you.
Well, and I know Bill Bertrell still does it that way, and it always sounds great.
Yeah.
They usually put a freaking mic on everything. A mic on the bass drum, a mic under the snare, mic on top of the snare, a mic on the top hat, a mic, 2 overhead mics on all the toms. Some guys would, not be so intense with the microphones, and maybe they'd have one mic to pick up 2 toms or whatever. But everyone had their own little thing that they did.
You feel like what albums that you have recorded on that you feel capture your sound the best? I just want to get hip to it.
I that's hard. Can't even remember all the albums that I played on. One that I'm proud of, that I think the drums sounded pretty good, was Randy Newman's 12 Songs.
Wow.
And Clarence played on that too, of course. And played on a Rolling Stones thing. It was a movie track, and I can't remember the name of the tune.
I saw it today, and I can't. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Sounded pretty good on that, but the Byrds, some of the Byrds stuff sounded great.
But you're telling me that the engineer with the Byrds mic'd all the drums?
Oh yeah.
Wow. That's fascinating.
Oh yeah, but we're talking about 16-track, 2-inch 16-track with 2 equalizers and preamps and old U47 microphones. And just the old equipment was pretty fantastic.
I absolutely it was. Did you said Clarence played as a session musician? He was in the union, I guess. Did you?
We were all in the union. You had to be in the union.
Gene, can you please tell me about some of these early union gigs for Gene Parsons? Did you do Suds and Duds? Did you do car commercial? I need to hear about some of these early gigs.
I played on Malvina Reynolds' songs.
Whoa.
Played a bunch of different instruments on her album. Alex Hasselliv, I guess called me and said, "Can you put drums, I put bass, banjo, a bunch of other stuff, harmonica. I played with the Everly Brothers. Both Clarence and I did.
And in that session, did you guys hit live as a band, or did you overdub?
Oh, we overdubbed.
You overdubbed it.
Yeah.
Or maybe
Randy Newman, we did live.
That's beautiful.
And
oh man.
Phil Oakes, we did an album with him. Clarence was on, and I was playing drums, and Dr. John playing keyboards.
Mac Rebenak.
And Mac Rebenak. And fact is, I got us on Kingdom for a Car, which was one of Phil's good songs. I played drums on that. And Chris Etheridge played bass on that.
Dude, he was from Mississippi, wasn't he?
Yep.
Did you know? And also the other cat I needed to ask you about is Spooner Oldham.
Oh, Spooner. Well, I didn't have a lot of... when we were in the Burritos, Spooner came out and played with us and did some stuff.
He did?
And,
Spooner was playing with Gene Parsons in the Burritos?
Yeah.
Ah, that's making my day, man. Dude, Spooner's one of the... I'm telling you, man, because he knew Chris from back home. Or they were from Mississippi. That was their...
Well, I think that's how Spooner got, involved with us, is through Chris.
That's right, dude. Chris Etheridge, man. He was one of the guys that helped lock you in and not make you rush. Was he one of the elders for you?
No, he wasn't. Actually, he wasn't one of the ones.
Who were they? Like Jimmy Bond? Like, I mean, who were like your elder bass players who were like, "Don't rush, kid"?
Well, Jerry Sheff was one.
Dude, Jerry Sheff. Dude, Ron Tutt lives, man.
Keep in touch. He lives in Germany now.
Oh, I love him, dude. Ronnie Tutt lives, man.
Yeah, Jerry took me out. My first really big session was at Capitol Records, and I can't even remember who it was with, but James Burton was on it. Wow. I was playing drums.
Wow.
Jerry Sheff was playing bass, and I was holding the session up because I was rushing. I was nervous because it was a big session. And Jerry, after a few takes that we tried that were aborted, Jerry said, let's take a break. And he said, Gene, come with me. We went out in the hall, and he says, sit down. He says, sit down. He says, there's something that we musicians call the thing. He says, now the thing is like a wall. He said, if you're trying to you're trying to balance on top of a wall, and you can if you jump too hard to get over the top of this wall, you're going to fall over on the other side. That's what you're doing right now. He said, if you don't jump hard enough, you're not going to be able to balance on top of that wall. You're going to fall over on this side. That's dragging. He says, you got to jump and just balance right on top of that wall. That's the thing. When you're balanced on top of that wall and you put just enough energy to get up there and balance, that's called the thing, and you won't rush. And that, another drummer who I've forgotten his name, a really good studio drummer that worked with Jerry a bunch. I wish I could remember his name.
It wasn't Ron Tutt.
No. It's one you don't hear very much about that was on just everybody's records, and I'll have to look it up.
It's okay. That's so. What a guy, dude! You made.
80, so
you made my month of May already.
I did not rush after that.
With the Jerry Sheff.
Since.
So so it was mainly just the idea of balancing on that wall, and that talk inspired you.
Pushing just enough to get on top of that wall, and not pushing to go over. Not pushing so hard, knowing that you're going to balance up there. Don't put any more energy in to go over the other side. Just balance right up on top.
You were in the same studio scene.
When we went back in the studio, we got it in the first take, and I never rushed after that. Of course, there was a little bit of drugs involved there, but...
Well, whatever. I was going to ask you about, ultimately, for musicians today, I don't want to say what advice do you have, but how has music healed you as a person? How has it kept you youthful in spirit? How has it kept you alive?
Well, Jake, every day I come in, I played pedal steel for almost 55 years now. And I come in, it's my favorite instrument. It's my instrument of choice now. I play with several bands here in Mendocino. And every day I come in, I sit down and I play hour and a half, 2 hours on the pedal steel. And it's my meditation. It's what keeps me off the street. That and doing string benders for people.
Gene Parsons, man, we just cooked for 50 minutes, dude. Set one in the books. Can you?
It's been a pleasure talking to you. It really has.
Yeah, thank you. Can you give me your email so I can send you a copy of this?
Sure.
Yeah.
It's real easy. All lowercase.
Yeah.
G Parsons, G-Parsons, the letter G, Parsons, at MCN, it's like Mother Cat Nancy.
Got it.
.org. So it's gparsons at mcn.org.
It was an honor, sir. We'll do it again.
It's a pleasure, and thank you very, very much for persevering. I'm sorry that I hung you up with the schedule.
Dude, it was well worth the wait, man. Thank you.
Bless.
Later. Bye.